Good evening, everybody. Again, it's really great to be here. First, real quick, because we got three very good speakers that are coming up. I just want to do sort of level setting and also a little bit of background information. So for those how many of you have heard of MITRE Corporation before? Oh, you have? Well, that's good. For those that haven't, MITRE Corporation operates, we're a not-for-profit, about 9,000 employees. It operates what's called Federally Funded Research and Development Center. The basic idea of MITRE operates in the public service. So MITRE is supposed to only can work for federal, state, and local governments. Can't compete against anybody commercial. It has to be a hard problem set that the government has. And the topic we're talking about today has been really sort of a mainstay in San Antonio. We've been working in cyber for at least 40 years, I know of, in the San Antonio area, before it became popular as a word, etc. So related to that, remember I said we operate in the public service interest, and we have two of our more talented cyber people here this evening, technically and otherwise. But at the same time, we like to engage with our community. So as part of our engagement with the community, we do have this partnership that we've established at the University of Texas, San Antonio. And we do call it Project Xander, but the basic ideal is this, that our communities, our small businesses, our local communities are facing a number of challenges, which you'll hear a little bit further about this particular evening. And we want to do something about it. So we collaborated with the University of Texas, San Antonio. We as MITRE provide the vendors and help with the oversight. The University of Texas, San Antonio had the future of what we're doing in cyber, the students in a graduate class, that we work together to do assessments. And right now we're working with 12 nonprofits this particular time. We've been for about a year and a half. And three of them are here tonight, and we're very pleased, and they're definitely platform, and we're very pleased. So I'm going to go ahead now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to, can I stick her? Well, I'll let you. I want to introduce you. Okay, Kid Howell.
Hello, everyone. Bobby asked me to come and speak to you all about some of the cyber response activities that I actually do on my Air National Guard side. So that is what I'm going to focus on tonight. I'm currently the J6 Cyber Operations Branch Chief. What that means in not so fancy terms is that all of the cyber operations are all the incident response and making sure we protect the Texas Military Department networks. That operations falls underneath me. And I'm also the acting J6, which means all the common IT assets within the Air National Guard within the state of Texas fall underneath me as well. Our actual A6 is forward deployed to the border right now, so I'm stepping in and filling that role. So we do all the network defense, and then DomOps is just a fancy word for domestic operations. So whenever there is a fire, a hurricane, a flood, and a cyber incident, Texas Military Department has organizations that come forward and do a DomOps response. The IT or the cyber responses, which is what we're going to talk about tonight, fall underneath my branch. And I've actually participated in 3 cyber responses, full-fledged cyber responses over the last few years, and that's what we're going to be focused on today. We have in the Texas Military Department, Army National Guard, Air National Guard, as well as State Guard personnel. So we actually have all 3 flavors within the TMD, and we use them for their various assets and skill sets within our cyber responses. So that's me on the Texas military side. I have been with MITRE now for over 20 years, and I have worked solely and purposely in the PKI and the identity management space. So you'll hear me a couple times tonight say very bad things about passwords. I am not a password fan, and I have never been a password fan. So I look for other ways for people to authenticate themselves to various websites or various applications. And I was speaking with John a little bit earlier. The way I like to tell people what I do for MITRE as I support the Air Force is if everybody thinks online, and you know that little padlock that everybody says, hey, you gotta find the padlock, and I think John's gonna get into some of that tonight. Make sure you have that little padlock on there so you have a secure transmission. And then, unfortunately, most places still do username and password. But that padlock, that security that's provided, when you see that little logo there, and that's all it is a logo, it's not actually doing the work, but that security that's underneath that, that's what I do for the Air Force. And I've been doing that for almost 20 years, or over 20 years now. All right, can anybody tell me what's wrong with this? Uh-oh, I see a hand trying not to go up. All right, what's wrong with it?
Password right on
Yep. So not only is the password on there, but the username is on there as well. And this is no kidding from one of the responses we went to, because we had to go and sanitize all the computers, over 1,400 computers. We actually collected them, wiped them, we connected them, got some data from them, then re-imaged them. And I will not tell you how many of these little yellow stickies we found throughout that environment. So, and I only tell you all that and show you that this was actually a pretty robust city. And as I said, it was over 1,400 computers, and those are individual computers, not the servers and everything. 1,400 computers that we had to re-image. So we're talking about a pretty good system. They had 8 admins that was running their network. So it's not like these people were not properly trained. And yet, we still found this abundant throughout the environment. And everybody's shaking their head, so hopefully y'all gone past that. But I want to tell you, it still happens today. And how many years have you been seeing this out there? So, next slide, please. The other thing, all right, something got out of whack. All right, can you go back to the partnership slide? Because I want to really hit on that. So, partnerships in the TMD is huge. We do a lot of partnering within the TMD because that helps us in our cyber responses. And it's not just what you may think of Army and Air working together or us working with the individual communities. We actually have relationships through ERCOT. We have relationships through DIR, which is the Department of Information Resources. And they're actually the ones that drive all the cyber incident responses and help local communities, local businesses throughout the state. But we have partnerships with law enforcement. We have partnerships with other countries, with other federal agencies that are out there, just to be able to know who we can work with when there's something that happens. The other part of that is not only knowing who you can work with, but actually working with them, doing tabletop exercises with them. You see Chile up there, you see Egypt up there, and Czech Republic. Each one of those countries, we have 5 engagements a year with them to work through specific cyber-related activities, IT-related activities, so that they are learning from us and we're learning from them. Because they may have indicators of things that are going on that we don't see within our state, but they're also looking from us to say, hey, you've got a lot of education, a lot of experience in this area, so we'll help them as well.
Do you guys do those like in tabletops, or how do you do those engagements?
So it depends on the country and what they're willing to do, and it depends on the experience level that they may have. Like last year in December, we did a tabletop exercise, a very senior level tabletop exercise with Chile. But we also will have Czech Republic and we had Chile actually come into a no kidding hands-on red versus blue type environment. So it depends on the country and how experienced they are and what level we're at that we will do those engagements. And it varies every year to what we can do. COVID really hurt us a lot. But we've been able to actually get the virtual engagements going back again.
Nice.
But you see Lower Colorado River Authority, so it's not only government type agencies. They've been an active participant for 4 years now. They have actually gone to some of our cyber flats, and they've been a commercial partner with us in those events. Then we also participate in a bunch of conferences and exercises. Again, it's to get not only our folks hands-on, this is what you're going to see out there, but it's also getting those relations built up so we know that when we go out, hey, I know that John knows this kind of skill set, I want to take John on this response. Or, hey, I know that Tom over in DIR can do this with us. And understanding what those capabilities are that the other assets have, so as we do something, we can respond. And keep that in mind when I get to an event here later where we really have a whole bunch of us working together to get that happening. All right, go forward 2 slides, since apparently I leave my slides around to remember it. All right, so this is a basic response plan, basic response phases that you'll go through. And you can ask 5 different cyber people and get 10 different answers as to what the actual response phases are. And it just depends. They're almost all the same, but there's variances in there. The first thing you want to do is triage. no matter what you're doing, you want to triage. You want to understand what it is the scope of the incident is happening, determine what the actual effect is on your infrastructure, and then kind of start figuring out what kind of data you need to gather. And this is important if, you want to find out who the arbitrator was. If you have insurance and you need to file insurance claims, you need to know what kind of data they need to have. Or if you want to just be able to make sure you eradicate the actual intruder, you want to make sure what kind of data you're getting. Next thing you want to do is you want to contain them. You want to stop that adversary's movement, limit their ability to move around your network, move around your environment. So you want to put firewall blocks in. You want to, if you have some kind of antivirus in there that you can stop their malware from moving, those kind of things you want to apply. Next thing you want to do is you want to eradicate. You want to get them out of your network. You want to ensure that as you are eradicating them, they're not coming in on another back door. USBs are notorious for this. We've done a few operations in the past where we go and we clean a network, and then as soon as we leave, somebody brings in a USB that's infected and our sensors start going off. And we never leave a place without at least a couple sensors in place because we don't want to leave and then have to be called back the next week for an incident. But USBs are notorious for reinfecting your machines because it was in when the infection came. They pulled it out because, everybody said to power down your machines. Bad move. And so they pulled their USB out, and then they come back in Monday morning, they stick it back in, and lo and behold, now I have that same virus back running through my network. And then finally, you want to recover. And this can take many, many different forms. Your primary goal here is to get back to normal. And you'll see when we get to the two incidents I'm going to highlight tonight, that is really where we want to get these communities back to, is getting back to normal. And definition of normal is different for every single incident. And that's what you've got to work with when, if you're the business owner, what does normal mean to you? One of the people said they were a child care owner. Oh, over here. Your normal, maybe I just need my internet back up and running so my parents can see my video streaming. I don't know if you're going to do that, but whatever your normal is, it may be, I just need to get back to my payroll, so I can do payroll on this Friday. Whatever your normal is, it's going to be different for every one of you. You need to understand what that normal is. So that may be removing blocks that you may have put in place for that containment. It may be rebuilding files, rebuilding those payroll records that you may need. It may be something as severe as rebuilding your server and your entire network. First and foremost, it may be going back and either implementing multi-factor authentication or at a minimum changing those passwords that you had put in place. So again, what the return to normal is for you varies. It just depends on what your environment requires. All right, next slide, please. Just one more thing on Texas Military Department. So this is how you get to us through a very long process through DIR, and I won't bore you with that. But we actually have what's called, for all of the DOMOP support, a mission ready package catalog. And there's over 100 different packages that Team D supports, supporting all the different DOMOPS missions. We have 2 dedicated to cyber, which is the Joint Cyber Response Team and the Joint Cyber Management Team. Typically me, because I'm the colonel, I will sit on this team. However, I have participated actually on the Incident Response Team as well, which is always real fun when I get to go back hands on keyboard. With the first one, since the Joint Cyber Response Team is an 8-person team, and we go and pick around the proper people we need to do that response. So if you remember when I said we were triaging and we were identifying what kind of skill sets and stuff we needed to be able to do that response, as we understood the environment. So if we need an infrastructure guy, we'll pull an infrastructure person. If we need a server lady, we'll bring that server. If if it's Exchange or if it's just SharePoint or something, we'll pull that proper skill set in. If it's someone that we need to do malware analysis, we'll pull that skill set in. If we're actually trying to identify the adversary, we'll pull that skill set in. We have the people catalog that we need to support whatever that triage is. Then we can go identify the people that go and support that. And then the management team, this is where a lot of our coordination actually happens. We have one person that we actually send into the field no matter what. Typically, it's a senior officer or a senior NCO that will go out there and be our coordinator on the field. They will meet with the county judge or the city mayor or the business owner or whatever it is that we're actually responding to. And they will be our boots on the ground person that will actually run the other team and then feed information back to us. But we'll also have people that will go and work with DIR and keep them informed. So we have a few different functions that we report in that management team. Next slide, please. So this was our first big exposure, Judge Sinclair out in Jackson County, Texas, had actually heard of us, but she called us and said, "Hey guys, my entire county has just been ransomware," and they took everything down. The people in the jails could not get something out of the commissary. Their friends and family couldn't put money into their bank accounts. They couldn't meet payroll. They couldn't do land appraisals. Everything that Jackson County did to function was locked up, and they didn't want to pay the ransom. So we had people on the ground in 2 days, which is amazing for the guard because we normally have a 72-hour response time minimum. But we actually had people on the ground in 2 days, out there figuring out what it was we could do. And this is the whole timeline. I unfortunately cannot let y'all keep these slides. We can share them, we can talk about it. This one and the next one I'm talking to you about are both public, but we don't share the slides for obvious reasons. But needless to say, both this incident and the next incident, which is really kind of interesting, were both managed service provider entries. So if you are a small business or a non-for-profit, you're typically used as a managed service provider for your IT support. And you need to understand what your managed service provider's responsibilities are and what your responsibilities are for that managed service provider. Because if something like this happens, you need to know how fast they can react. You need to know what it is they're going to do. You need to know what it is you're responsible for as the managed service provider does their actions. And if they're accountable for an incident like this that happens. So what actually happened here in this one is that the managed service provider had a escalated privilege attack happen, and the adversary was able to push a package down to an unpatched system. And from that one system, they were able to laterally move across the county's network and it basically locked everything up with that ransomware. Our team went out there, we did the triage, we called in the first 8-person team to start doing the work. Actually on this one, we actually got to do some of the malware analysis, and we were looking for the adversary. We were sharing information with DIR and FBI both on this incident, and showing them what we were seeing down there. This one was a little bit unique in that Jackson County wanted us to come and help them through the recovery. And so we were able to actually put a couple phases in place where we took our cyber response team, split it in half and did certain functions, and it took us a couple months, but we finally got them fully back up. We had to totally rebuild their system from the ground up, their entire infrastructure from the ground up. But we did put in place things like USB scanners. So we actually had standalone machines where we could actually do a USB scan to make sure it did not contain malware before we actually connected it to a machine that was on the network. We also instituted stronger password policies in place, and we put them on the trail to get to a multi-factor authentication solution, which my understanding is now they've actually started doing in Jackson County for all of their clerks and admins that are actually on their network daily. And then finally, Judge Sinclair actually has come a couple of times up to various briefings we have up there and showing that community involvement and how important it is that we need to know and work with their IT folks. We would not have gotten as far as we did without their IT folks on hand, but we've now built a relationship with them. We go out there about every 6, well, we were doing it every 6 months, but now with COVID, we stopped only every year, but go out there and do some scans for them and make sure that their networks are still good. Next slide, please. This is the big incident that happened in Texas a couple years ago. And this is one that, without those partnerships I showed you earlier, we never would have been able to respond to. TMD alone responded to 22 sites that we were actively involved in across the state. That does not account for Texas A&M University's response team. That does not account for DIR's response team, AT&T's response team, and a few other response teams that were out there across the state supporting the state. This again was an managed service provider, MSP injected malware attack. And this one actually started through some of the police systems that were out there. And again, it looked for vulnerable systems, pushed the patch out, and then moved laterally. I don't think it is on here. So 3 base security forces were affected. These are DoD security forces sites that were affected. 4 sheriff's office, 7 police departments, 8 city and police departments that were involved. All across the board was getting hit. We had places that public utilities were not work because they were able to go from the law enforcement side and jump over to their public services sector. Payroll was down in quite a few of those counties. A couple of backups locations were affected because they had their backups online. They did not have their backups offline. What does Dr. White always say? Oh, come on, y'all had to have Dr. White already. No? Dr. White's one of the professors at UT. I've been mentoring at UTSA now for, this is the 3rd or 4th semester. We've been over there for a while now. So, thank you. Dr. White, when you take his class, Dr. White will sit. I've also worked with Dr. White on the Team side. We created a Texas Executive Senior Leadership course with him, but Dr. White will tell you backup. So you should have a very quick backup, every 7-day backup that you store locally. Then you should have an every 6-month backup or a monthly backup that you should store offline, and then a 6-month backup that you store offsite. So backup. And you can tell Dr. White I just mentioned. So backup. That doesn't mean you do 3 backups tomorrow and you're good for the rest of your life. Weekly, monthly, 6 months, and the 3rd one has got to be offsite, which means it's offline, so they can't get to it. Anyways, with some SCADA systems were actually affected with this, and over 42,000 Texans that we were supporting during this incident. So it was a very, very quick response. And again, for each one of these counties that we were in, we had determined what that return to normal was. And before we could come off mission, we actually had to go back through the Department of Emergency Management in each of those counties, and they had to say, yep, we're good for y'all to depart. So, anyways, I think that's my last slide. I hope y'all got something out of that. And as you can see, the threat is real. The threat does happen even in our great state of Texas.